Hello and welcome. My name is Lori Modisett, and I'm the Director of Education and Chair of the Commission on Ministry for the Episcopal Diocese of Wyoming. I'd like to welcome you to this training for licensed ministers. We're going to start off with learning about Eucharistic ministers. The licensing of ministries is addressed in Title 3, Canon 4 of the Canons of the Episcopal Church. Section 6 states that a Eucharistic minister is a layperson authorized to administer consecrated elements at the celebration of Holy Eucharist. A Eucharistic minister should normally act under the direction of a deacon or a member of the clergy or other leader exercising oversight of the congregation or other faith community. A Eucharistic minister should have education and practice in the following areas, and those listed on this slide will be addressed within this PowerPoint. Let's first take a look at a bit of Eucharistic theology. The Eucharist is the sacrament of Christ's body and blood. It's the principal act of Christian worship, and the word Eucharist comes from the Greek thanksgiving. Jesus instituted the Eucharist on the night when he was betrayed. At the Last Supper, he shared the bread and cup of wine at a sacred meal with his disciples. He identified the bread with his body and the wine with his blood of the new covenant. And Jesus commanded his disciples to do this in remembrance of him. On page 859 of the Book of Common Prayer, our Catechism tells us that Christ's sacrifice is made present by the Eucharist, and that in it we are united to his one self-offering. The Last Supper provides the basis for the fourfold Eucharistic action of taking, blessing, breaking, and giving. Christ's body and blood are really present in the sacrament of the Eucharist and received by faith. Christ's presence is also known in the gathered Eucharistic community. The Eucharistic vessels used in the service are a paten or plate for the bread, a chalice or cup for the wine, and cruets which hold the wine and the water prior to the consecration. This next slide shows the various altar linens. The first linen we'll talk about is the altar cloth, or the fair linen. The fair linen represents the shroud in which Jesus was buried. On the fair linen are 5 crosses, one in each of the 4 corners and one in the center. These crosses represent the 5 wounds of Christ. The corporal is laid on top of the fair linen. Corporal means body. And the corporal is basically used to catch any crumbs or drips that might happen during the consecration. Purificators are used to wipe the chalice after each person receives communion, and also to wipe the excess wine out of the chalice after communion is finished. The pall is a 7x7 square of linen with a stiff piece of plexiglass or cardboard in the center. A pall is placed over the chalice during communion, and it's to help protect and cover the Eucharistic elements during communion. So where do you learn all the details regarding your Eucharistic ministry? A good place to start are with the rubrics in the Book of Common Prayer. Rubrics are instructions or directions, and these are found in italics throughout the Book of Common Prayer. Please notice the difference where you have choices or the word may is used. It would be a good idea for you to read page 361 through 367 of the Book of Common Prayer, which is right 2. Look and read all the italicized parts, and then go to page 406 and read all of the additional directions. This exercise will give you a good overview of the distribution of the sacred elements of Holy Eucharist. The attire worn when you're serving as a Eucharistic minister varies from congregation to congregation depending on custom. A Eucharistic minister may wear a white alb with a cincture, a cassock and surplice, or street clothing. Again, as per custom, during the service, the Eucharistic minister may sit in the chancel area with the priest and the worship leader if one is used, or in the congregation. If in the congregation, the Eucharistic minister should come forward during the Lord's Prayer or after the fraction. It is recommended that the priest and the Eucharistic minister both use hand sanitizer before administering Holy Communion. The words said when administering the chalice should match what is being said by the person distributing the bread. If the bread is given with the words, "the body of Christ, the bread of heaven," the person distributing the wine should say, "the blood of Christ, the cup of salvation," when offering the cup. Or the default phrase would be, "the blood of Christ." A few slides back, we talked about the Eucharistic actions of taking, blessing, breaking, and giving or sharing. Your role as Eucharistic minister is to give. So, how do you give the wine? First of all, the priest will hand you the chalice and the purificator, or he may set it down on the altar and then you take it up to go to wherever you will be distributing communion. Hold the chalice securely in one hand with the purificator in the opposite hand. Offer the chalice to the communicant, and they should reach out and guide it to their mouths, but you don't release it totally. Allow the person to guide the chalice to their lips and make sure that they get a sip of the wine. If a small child is at the altar rail, ask the child to stand. It's much easier for them to receive the chalice while standing rather than with the altar rail in their way. After each person receives the wine, wipe the edge of the chalice, inside and out, firmly with the purificator, and then turn the chalice a quarter turn before offering it to the next communicant. Adjust the purificator several times during communion so that more than one area of the purificator is used for wiping and you've always got a clean spot. If a person has their arms crossed across their chest, this indicates they do not wish to receive the wine. You or the priest may give them a blessing rather than offer them the chalice. Intincting. If people wish to have the bread or the host dipped in the wine rather than drinking from the common cup, the Eucharistic minister should take the bread from the person, dip it in the wine, and then place it in the person's mouth. This guards against fingers touching the wine and passing germs. There may be times when you as a Eucharistic minister may be asked to distribute the bread during communion. With the paten in one hand, or you can have an acolyte carry the paten for you, break off a small bite of the bread off from the loaf, if using actual bread, or take a host in your dominant hand. Hold it in front of the person receiving, saying the words, "the body of Christ, the bread of heaven," or "the body of Christ." Place the bread in the person's hand and move on to the next person. Nothing is ever perfect all the time, and you will have your share of oops. If wine is spilled on the altar rail, wipe it up with a purificator immediately. If wine gets spilled on the floor or carpet in front of the person receiving, place a purificator over the spilled wine, and then get a clean purificator and continue to serve. Then, after the service, clean the spilled wine with water and a purificator. And if a piece of bread or host is dropped on the floor, pick it up, put it to the side, and dispose of it properly after the service.
Just a few other notes regarding being a Eucharistic minister. It is not necessary that a person receive both the bread and the wine in order for it to be a valid communion. Various circumstances or medical conditions may prevent a person from receiving one of the elements. In such a situation, it is suitable to receive the sacrament in one kind only. I would ask that you have a conversation with the clergy in your congregation about the customs surrounding the Eucharist within your specific context. And anytime you have visiting or supply clergy, please discuss with them prior to the service how they wish you to serve and what they would like you to do. I hope this short presentation has been of help to you in your ministry as a Eucharistic minister. If you would like to learn more about this special way of serving God and His Church, you might wish to read the book The Cup of Salvation, a manual for Eucharistic ministers by Beth Wickenberg Ely. This book is available on Amazon, Amazon Smile, or from Church Publishing, Inc. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention during this presentation, and also thank you for your service and your ministry. God's blessings on you always.